How many moments of your life have you forgotten? How many moments have we forgotten collectively as a society? How many major, history-changing events went undocumented because we all just forgot? I promise, these are serious questions. I sure as hell wouldn't be asking if it weren't important, or dire even. I'm not sure how to explain what I'm about to reveal. And even if I find a way, I'm genuinely worried about the ramifications I might invite. I'm still going to try to put into words what I experienced. If I fail, if I come off as some mentally unstable nutcase, I'll accept that burden. I'll pay that price. I'm not even sure if anyone else is capable of comprehending the secrets I'm about to reveal. It's not even because they aren't capable, it's just that they don't remember. It really does all come back to memory and the things we forget, hence the questions I posed earlier. Those questions matter to me more than most because my brain is different in certain regards. Ever hear stories about people who claim they have an eidetic or photographic memory? Well, some of those claims are bullshit, but others are real and that the people have rare brain abnormalities. And I just know how abnormal they can be because, well, I'm one of them. For reasons that still aren't understood, the brains for people like me are wired a certain way. They can recall memories with a level of clarity that few can match. For some, it's like a superpower, being able to remember every line from a book with ease. For others, it's a real pain in the ass, being able to remember every moment of your life so vividly. And for me personally, it's a bit of both, but it's definitely more of the latter than the former these days. Now, for the record, this isn't something I've dealt with my entire life. I don't even think it qualifies as a talent or skill. According to my parents, I had this weird recurring fever for much of my early childhood. Even when I was just an infant, I was constantly sick, resulting in plenty of hospital visits and numerous days confined to a bed. Over time, and with plenty of treatment, as well as some medications that were never fully revealed to me, the fever subsided, and they finally stopped entirely when I was 7. But even as I recovered, there were still some lingering effects. My thoughts, my emotions, and my memories, they all became quite erratic for a while. My parents said I would randomly forget my name, the date, or even what a car was. Understandably, this left them quite concerned. That led to more medications and treatments. But once that condition stabilized, my brain settled into this strange new state. Suddenly, every moment of my life, going back to 1:38 p.m. on the day of my 8th birthday, I can recall it all in near perfect detail. I could tell you what I ate, what I said, what others said, and how many dogs walked by the house that morning. I know that may seem impressive, but trust me, it's not all it's cracked up to be. Remembering everything, from the mundane to the joyous to the tragic, it really takes a toll. It strains your mind, body, and your entire sense of being. At times, you feel so defined by your memories, like that's the entire sum of who you are as a person. And trying to act outside of that is just, I don't know. I'm sorry, I've always struggled making sense of this. And after what happened last year, well, it's become something far greater than a personal struggle. But when I say last year, I don't mean the year before I posted this message. I'm not even referring to a specific year on the calendar. You see, I remember an entire year that nobody else seems to remember. From 12 a.m. on January 1st to 11:59 p.m. on December 31st, a full 365 days of human existence is just unaccounted for. The world kept spinning, the universe went on like it always did, but every human being on this planet, and every clock, device, and time-measuring tool we have, they all just plain forgot. I know, it sounds crazy. I know I sound crazy. Believe me, I've questioned my sanity on more than one occasion. But according to my memories, my painfully vivid memories, there is a year-long gap in our shared history. And the forces behind that gap, well, that's what I've been struggling to make sense of. Fittingly enough, it all comes back to the events of the year 2020, but not for the reasons you're thinking. I'm sure everyone has accumulated bad memories of 2020. The COVID-19 pandemic, that was plenty bad. I lived through that too. But I promise you, that year has nothing on what I remembered. And all those horrible things you remembered from that specific year, I can attest that they didn't need to be that bad. In fact, they shouldn't have been. Everything that led up to the events of 2020 and all the lingering effects from that year, it all had a basis in the lost year that only I seem to be able to remember. How it began? Well, it was actually pretty mundane. On December 31st, 2019, the last New Year's Eve of the decade, I was home alone, but not by choice. I'd actually been planning to visit my parents, but I had just started a new job at this accounting firm. They were paying me a lot of money to use my memory to keep track of their budget. But things got messier than usual in the last quarter. And due to a few late nights and an unexpected snowstorm, I was left stranded. In retrospect, it was probably a good thing I was stuck. I really don't want memories of what my family went through during that lost year. But that was the last lucky break I got. Because at approximately 10:49 p.m. that night, I decided to turn in early. I was really tired. I had a single glass of whiskey after eating a cheap TV dinner. So I just went to sleep, fully expecting to wake up on January 1st, 2020 like everyone else. But that is not what happened. The next morning, I woke up at approximately 6:24 a.m., like I always do, even on weekends. But when I checked my phone, there was this weird error message. The whole screen just read, "Generic error, please wait." None of my other apps worked, and the clock didn't read a specific time or date. It just read 0000 a.m., and the date was listed as NA 2020. I thought it was just a software error, so I restarted my phone. But that didn't fix it. I then turned on my computer, but I got the same error message. I tried turning on my TV, but the screen was blank. Every channel just had the same weird static, along with a message stating, "Please stand by." Even all the clocks and digital displays in my apartment were off. Every time just read the same, 0000. And even the old-fashioned clock that hung over the door in my foyer, it just stopped at midnight. It wasn't moving at all. Not gonna lie, I was getting plenty freaked out. At first, I thought there had been a power outage, or maybe some kind of cyber attack. But my electricity and my heat were still on. So I tried to reset everything, but I couldn't. Then I decided to go outside and check with my neighbors. And that's when the time of day became the least of my worries. The first thing I noticed when I went outside was the sky. There were clouds, but not the natural clouds you'd expect on a cold winter morning. They looked more like veils, these thick greenish sheets that went from horizon to horizon. You could still see the sun, but even the light from the sun seemed off. And as it shone through, it covered my entire area in this strange, eerie twilight. I remember every tint and detail so vividly, but I still lack the words to describe it. I just stood there for a good 23 and a half minutes, rubbing my eyes and trying to figure out what was wrong. At one point, I thought I was dreaming or something, and I would awaken at any moment. But that moment never came. And it wouldn't come. Not for a full year. After convincing myself that I wasn't dreaming, I tried looking around for my neighbors. And keep in mind, it's freezing cold outside. There's a lot of snow on the ground. These are not ideal conditions. But I do eventually find someone. My neighbor, Irene Cartwright. She's with her roommates, Caroline Juarez and Tammy Perrine. They're just standing out on their porch. They're not looking at the sky. They're not looking at each other. They're just there, still wearing the same clothes they probably wore to bed last night. I try to walk up to them, but they don't respond. I yell into their ears. I wave my hand across their faces. I even try shaking them to get their attention. Nothing worked. They just kept standing there with this blank, cold expression. And it wasn't just them either. They also have a golden retriever, Barry, and he's usually barking up a storm at this hour, begging to be walked despite the weather. But when I looked into their apartment, I just see Barry sitting in the corner, staring blankly at the wall. I tried calling out to him. I even tried picking him up. He's still breathing. His eyes are still open. He's clearly alive, just like the girls, but they're all just still frozen. At this point, I start to get really scared. I rush outside and try to find others. I knock on every door. I run across the street. I try to find someone, anyone who can explain what's happening. But all I find is more cold, eerie silence. There are cars on the road, but they're all not running. There are people in the driver's seat, but they're just sitting there, frozen like everyone else. There are also people standing around, some in heavy coats, some in just their underwear, not at all bothered by the cold. And they're just staring off into space, alive but completely unaware. I ran up and down the block. I ran into open stores, only to find nobody there. I tried to use other people's phones, but they all had the same error, as well as the same broken clock. I didn't know how far this went. Was it just my neighborhood, or was it the entire world? At that point, fear turned to desperation, and I just started shouting out. Hello? What's going on? What's happening? But all I heard back was silence. This cold, horrible silence. I don't remember seeing any animals at all, be they birds flying in the sky or animals rustling through the trees. I'm so freaked out at this point that I rush home, barricade my door, and prepare to hide under my bed like a scared child. But then, just as I'm closing the curtains to my room, I finally see something. Up the street, from the roads leading to the highway, a caravan of these big black vans come rolling in. They are not marked. They have no identifying logos. They don't even make much noise other than when they run over piles of snow and ice. At first I was relieved, but then they get closer, and I'm terrified all over again. On every road, along every street, in every accessible area within view, the vans pull up. The side doors open, and these figures emerged. I wish I could describe them better, but be grateful that I can't. They look human from a distance, but I promise you, they were not human. Not entirely. They were big, each one standing at least 7 feet tall. They were covered in what I can only describe as SWAT armor crossed with fire gear. I didn't hear them speak. They just gestured towards one another, using their hands to organize and give orders. I watched as they broke off into these teams of 10, going into every home, surrounding every person, and surveying every inch of land. They moved so quickly and efficiently together. They were less like trained soldiers and more like a swarm of insects, all operating with perfect coordination. Within an hour, they must have had the whole area blanketed. For all I knew, the same thing was playing out in every town, city, and state, regardless of size or population. At this point, I'm trying to contemplate the possibilities, but I'm so overwhelmed, my brain so flooded with vivid memories that I froze. Maybe what was happening to everyone else, it was finally catching up to me. I almost welcomed such blissful ignorance, if that's what it led to. But then, I heard the loud footsteps of the figures. I heard banging on the doors down the hall. Suddenly, I'm jarred from my frozen state, and I turn around just in time to see my door burst open. I'm too afraid to yell anything at this point, so I just tremble and cower. But these figures, these big, daunting figures whose faces I cannot see, whose humanity I cannot discern, they see me, they approach me, and with each step they take, I feel so small and insignificant, like an ant looking up at a mountain. That's when one of them finally speaks.
It's finally happened. We found an anomaly. Take him.
What happened next, I wish I could forget. 9 of these hulking figures, each of which was strong enough to take me on their own, surrounded me from all sides. They throw me on the floor. They restrain me. They put a bag over my head. Then someone hits me and I become woozy. I'm not unconscious. Perhaps I wasn't supposed to be. But from there, I surmise I'm taken out into one of these vans. And outside I hear more of these figures running about, all moving with such urgency. But once I'm in the van and it starts moving, I hear more talking. The same figure from earlier seemed to be relaying a message to someone.
It's worse than we thought. We may need to revise our timetables. We'll have to consider a recourse that's more disruptive.
There's more chatter after that, but I can't hear any of it. My head is still spinning. but I do remember hearing things like failure, cataclysm, and true memories. It's not enough for me to piece together the whole thing. I'm almost tempted to raise my voice. But I'm surrounded by these impossibly imposing figures. I know I don't stand a chance against any of them. I'm totally at their mercy, but at the same time, they all seem so concerned. When they look at me, I sense a genuine worry, as though my very presence is a problem. I keep my head down. I stay dead silent. The ride lasts approximately 1 hour and 27 minutes. We then arrive at our destination. I have no idea where it is or how far we've gone. The bag remains on my head as they carry me into some sort of facility. It's cold, it's dank, it's definitely not inviting. I almost don't want to see where I am. I think I went through several layers of security before they put me in some sort of cell. Then the figures leave, my restraints are undone, and I'm allowed to take the bag off. I'm still confused, terrified, and trembling with fear. I almost don't want to take it off, but I eventually do, expecting the worst. But what I find is, well, not as bad as it could have been. I'm in what feels like a well-furnished college dorm room. There's a twin-sized bed, a clean bathroom, and a kitchen area. There's even a closet full of clothes that look exactly like the ones I have in my closet back home. Overall, it's nicer than a prison, but it still feels like a prison. There are no windows, and the only way out is through this big, heavy door that I have no hope of opening. But what stood out most from everything in this room were the TVs. And what I guess counted as the living room, there was this large array of TVs built into the wall. They all seemed fully functional, but when I turned them on, there were no shows or movies. There was just footage of what was going on outside, footage of these figures swarming every city, town, and home. And near as I could tell, it was happening all over the world, from New York to Shanghai. These figures were all moving with such purpose, focused intently on certain areas and people. And they were doing something. For certain people, they were injecting something right into their necks. For others, they were physically opening their mouths and putting something else down their throats. There wasn't much sound, but there were a lot of messages in strings of code flashing across the screen. The all said things like reauthorizing social unrest in Sector 28A, altering regional weather patterns in Sector 19B, or initializing emergency perspective configuration across every sector. I sure as hell didn't know the implications, but whatever they were doing, nothing was stopping them. No one even flinched as they did what they did. And all the people and the entire world around them, it just let them do it. And near as I could tell, there were no storms, no delays, no disruptions of any kind. It was all though they just pressed a giant pause button and the world stopped. My brain, even with my memory capabilities, struggled to comprehend such a feat. I still thought I was going mad, but everything was still so vivid and clear. Every one of my senses told me that this was really happening. And all I could do was watch, listen, and remember. But that ended up being just the first day, one of the 365 that would follow. And for every one of those days, I remained in that cell. No phone, no one to talk to, and no answers of any kind. I was still cared for. Every day, 3 well-cooked meals were slipped into my room through a special slot in the kitchen. These beings actually knew what I liked to eat. They knew how I took my coffee, how I liked my burgers grilled with onions, and what kind of dressing I put on my salads. They even knew my preferred brand of soap, shaving cream, and shampoo. It was like they wanted to keep me comfortable, but they didn't want me to know more than I already did. I figured they were testing me by showing everything that transpired on the TVs, as if to confirm that I was aware while the rest of the world was not. And whether out of curiosity or masochism, that's how I spent much of this last year. I would wake up, eat, and watch these beings change the world before my very eyes on the TVs. Even when they supplied me with ample books, including some that nobody had ever read before, I mostly ignored them. I just watched this strange scene play out, these faceless beings traverse the world, affecting every person, place, and setting. For the first few months, it seemed mundane, as though they'd done this many times before. But towards July and August, things really changed. They became more active, for lack of a better word. I noticed a lot of activity in places like Wuhan, China, Washington, D.C., Moscow, Russia, and London, England. And by the time November rolled around, the messages changed too. I still couldn't make out their voices, but I did see some alerts flash on the screen in various languages. Of the ones I could make sense of, the most common message was this:
Unexpected error. Initiate emergency protocols 20XX.
That always seemed to get these beings moving faster. Even though I couldn't see their faces, I could still sense it. They were concerned, anxious even. But what could possibly concern them? What could possibly concern anyone capable of literally freezing the world for an entire year? I honestly didn't want to know the answer. I began reconciling my fate at this point. I genuinely believed that I would spend the rest of my days in this cell. I even thought about refusing to eat, preferring to starve myself to death and just watch this for the rest of my life. But I never let it go that far. I contemplated other potential recourses, but then the final day came. December 31st, New Year's Eve. On that day, the TV showed something different. The skies began changing again. The animals were starting to become active once more. The figures who had left no corner of this world untouched by their influence started disappearing. They got into their big vans and just drove off. I never saw where they went. I didn't even want to speculate. But as midnight approached, each TV screen went dark. One by one, they all shut down as though they were preparing for something. Eventually, there was just one left, one screen in the center, the one depicting my hometown. This was the last one to go off, but before it did, the screen shifted. At first it looked like static, but there was definitely someone, something on the other end. And he, she, it, whatever it was, they were looking at me. I wanted to yell, curse, and demand answers. After a year of isolation, I was truly on the brink of madness. But then the figure on the screen finally spoke. And what it said remains to this date my most haunting memory.
We apologize for your confinement. In 2 minutes, your room will be flooded with gas. That gas will render you unconscious. And when you awake, you will be in your room. The date will be January 1st, 2020. None will recall what transpired. But you, your ability to remain lucid is a troubling sign. It hints that your kind can subvert our directives, and we cannot have that. Not if you are to remain useful to us. We anticipated this happening eventually, but not this quickly. As such, expect the coming years to be disruptive. For humanity to serve their purpose, they must be. Because, if you truly knew your place in this world, if you could recall how and why we guide you the way we do, that would be a problem. A very serious problem.